Mesut Özil.
No! 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 No fucking way! You made me look a right cunt.
This is Arsecast Extra.
Hello and welcome to another Arsecast Extra, as always, with James from Gunnerblog. James, good evening to you.
Good evening to you too. It's nice to be here.
What a complete lie that is. I know. We're recording later than usual because you've been away this weekend doing your comedy stylings, on stage for people and what have you. But it seems to have had an effect. We are we appear to be trending on Twitter. Just the hashtag Arsecast Extra is trending on Twitter, such as the, I guess, interest or car crashiness of this particular podcast. People are on board.
Yeah, we last I saw we're just trailing Spider-Man and the word Duchess in the UK.
What has the word Duchess got to do with anything?
I think a Duchess is having a baby.
Oh, Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, who got married to Prince Harry.
Yeah, something like that. It's
right.
Like that.
Okay. Yeah, she was having a baby. Okay, well, good for her, I guess.
Congratulations. I mean, let's look for all the good news we can.
It's a rare event, babies being born doesn't happen every day, so...
That's true, yeah. But why not make a fuss, especially?
I guess so. Okay. I presume you had a good weekend?
I had a lovely weekend until approximately... I'll say about sort of 5 o'clock on Sunday, and things really started to take a turn. Maybe slightly later than that, but Sunday afternoon was a bit of a downer for me. How about you?
Yeah, the same. I mean, they don't make it easy for us. They haven't made it easy for us, have they? This last couple of weeks, it's been quite the... Let me see. I need to choose my words carefully here because I feel like with all this trending on Twitter, there's added pressure to scrutiny, to phrase things just right. But it has been a massive bag of shit. Yeah,
a really big bag of shit. A sack of shit, maybe.
Yeah. Absolutely. Some other container that's bigger than a sack. What's bigger than a sack that isn't...
A skip full of shit.
A skip of shit. That's exactly what it is. Because skips are terrible anyway, aren't they? They're sort of old and rusty looking, and it's just filled to the brim with Arsenal shit the last few weeks. So there we go. You said you had notes. Like I had notes last week. You've got notes this week. This is what's happening here. I mean, do you want to maybe start with your notes? Are they, is there things you want to talk about in a particular order? Where do we go? I mean,
I don't know. I mean, I feel like last week on the show there was a kind of a bit of a perception that I was sort of the more positive of the two. It's going to be hard to be quite positive on this one, I think.
Well, I mean, if you were perceived to be the more positive, that could still very well be the case.
Yes. Everything is relative, I guess.
It is relative.
No, it's an absolute disaster, really, as a result.
Like a really, really terrible result, particularly when you saw what happened the day before, when Tottenham lost... to nine-man Tottenham eventually lost to Bournemouth, and I was watching that game going, Jesus, Bournemouth are so bad. But if they could sneak a win here against the 9 men, that would set us up perfectly for our game. And then Manchester United drew with Huddersfield. And you're thinking, yes, it's on. Okay, Chelsea won, but that was not unexpected, really. And then we went out and did what we did, and I don't know. It's like there's some sort of force field or kryptonite or whatever it is. Where do we start? The team selection? I didn't really have a problem with the team selection, did you?
No, I don't really think it's about the team selection in this instance. And actually, in a couple of these instances, we are just in an absolutely diabolical run. Our Premier League form, although it's been punctuated by these European wins, is dire. I mean, it's as bad a run of results as I can remember. And I keep sort of expecting us to kind of level out, and I sort of think it won't carry on going. And Brighton at home, I mean, was the sort of the gimme of gimmies. I think, we all sort of thought, well, look, maybe Palace might be tricky, but Brighton, especially a Brighton team who, let's not forget, had their survival secured the previous day as well, so had nothing really at stake, nothing to play for.
But pride. They had pride, James.
Well, maybe they did. I mean, I don't know how much pride there was in the Arsenal team.
Not very much.
I mean, the team selection, I suppose, the only thing I would talk about is that the orientation of the midfield was a bit odd, I felt.
It was a diamond, wasn't it? It was Torreira to the right, Mkhitaryan to the left, Xhaka at the base, and Ozil to flit around and do his Ozil stuff at a sort of number 10 position behind two strikers who could work together and work wide, and
I guess in theory it worked. In practice, I mean, and it has worked at other times this season. I thought in practice it wasn't brilliant, but listen, everything else that happened this weekend set it up so perfectly. And I know we're not the only team between 3rd and 6th who's made a hash of this run-in, but as an Arsenal fan, it's completely maddening, isn't it? And when you look at how close we are to Spurs, I mean, it's a 3-point gap, and you think of the fixtures that we've had and the opportunities that we've had.
Where do you stand on that? Because people will say, we're only 3 points off. I know it's been terrible, but really we're only 3 points off 3rd. To me, that makes it worse. That makes it worse, the fact that we're only 3 points off. Everyone else has been so terrible, and I can't explain to you, I really cannot explain to you how little of a shit I give about how bad the other teams around us have been, as if that's some kind of justification for us being bad. People saying, well, the other teams, they don't seem to want, they're having a difficult time too, but I was like, who gives a fuck? We had an amazing opportunity over the last couple of weeks to secure top 4, and I know top 4 is not the be-all and end-all, it's not a trophy, and we still have an actual trophy to play for, but man alive, I mean...
Yeah, and I don't buy the sort of spin that the focus is absolutely on the Europa League, and
no.
I just don't really buy that. I don't believe Emery's lineups have suggested that he's sort of throwing the Premier League or anything like it.
Yeah.
I think we've tried to win these games.
And we just haven't been good enough to do it.
Yeah, I think that is true. And that's sort of more alarming in some ways. I mean, the only reason that I think the other teams' results are relevant in any way is, is there a sort of bigger picture about the fact that the clubs particularly the clubs who've been in the Europa League, like Chelsea, they are struggling to replicate their form in the Premier League, and maybe there is a case to be made for that. But I still think we should be winning not even all of these games, but some.
Even our 2 home games. Imagine if we'd won against Palace, and we can be as shit as we can be away from home, and we all know how shit that is. But if we'd won our 2 home games, how much healthier would this league table look right now?
Well, we'd be third.
We'd be third. It's just...
Yeah.
So I'm not buying into that. Like the others being bad only makes us look worse, as far as I'm concerned, because the only reason we're 3 points off 3rd is because all the other teams have been terrible too. But that's not to excuse how terrible we've been. And when you think about the last 6 games, we go to Everton and we lose to a 54-year-old man who hasn't scored in whatever since I don't know when. Jagielka, he wasn't even supposed to play that day. We win the game against Watford with a freaky goal, and they go down to 10 men. And then from the remaining 4 games, we've got 1 point. 1 point. It's really, really bad to have got to this position of the season. And I know this is something that has been said before, but this excuse making. I think it's excuse making when people say, well, where did you expect Arsenal to be really at the start? Where did you expect them to be? And I probably expected us to be kind of where we are right now, but you can't just look at it in isolation. You can't look at it without the context of how we are where we are, you know? And it's the fact that we've blown such an amazing opportunity to get top four, which I think, you know, people say, well, we still have the Europa League. I think it would maybe be beneficial for us in the Europa League if we had already secured top four, because it takes some of the pressure off.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you can play the kids if you want in the top four at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, that I think, the thing of, you know, what did you expect? Because I think that, you know, if the games were played in a different order, but we ended up with the same result, it would obviously change people's perception. But the reality is that expectations do shift within the course of a season. You know, it's like in many times in the past, let's say we're expecting top four, we had a good start to the season, suddenly we found ourselves in a title race. It's not like if we then fell out of the title race in March, we'd be like, oh, well, I never thought we were going to be in it, so I don't care. You know, once you get to a final, you want to win it. You don't go, well, I never thought we'd be here, so...
Yeah, who cares?
You know,
it's fine to lose. Yeah, exactly.
So I think when you look at the run that we had, and I think sort of off the back of the Spurs and United games, which were sort of back in March, weren't they? We came through those incredibly well, I thought, you know, really strong. And at that point, you looked at the fixture list and thought, this is really there for us to do. And actually, part of the reason that even after, say, the Everton match, I was like, I still think we'll get the top four, was because I just looked at those fixtures and thought, I think this team will win some of those games. And I'm so disappointed and a little bit baffled, to be honest, as to why. I don't think it's easy to say why
Right.
got such bad results.
I don't think it is either. I mean, I think there isn't one reason for it. There's a number of reasons. There are multiple reasons. I think Unai Emery is one. I don't think he's managed these last games particularly well. I think the players are another, because some of these players have not performed. Even if you think they're not good enough, and I would agree with many people and many opinions on these players that they're not good enough to do what we would ultimately like them to do, I still think they're capable of better than what we've seen in the last few weeks. You know, and there's fatigue as well to take into account. It's been a busy schedule in April. I think we can all see that. But, you know, when you look at our most disappointing results this season, beyond the 5-1 at Liverpool, which was kind of an aberration when you look at our games against the top six, the most disappointing results and performances have been against the smaller clubs, the smaller teams. So you lose you draw with Brighton away, you lose to West Ham away, you lose to Southampton away, what else? I mean, obviously we lose to Bate Borisov
this weekend.
This weekend. Yeah, you know, all of those things. And then also you go through some of the games from earlier in the season when perhaps they might have gone the other way. You know, the Cardiff game, which was a 3-2 away from home. There were games where during that unbeaten run that we had, you know, we kind of got a little bit of luck going our way against some of the smaller sides. So Emery's, it seems to me that after 37 games, Unai Emery's strength as a manager is when we face the bigger teams. Is when we're facing Chelsea, United, Tottenham, Manchester City, Manchester United. Those are the games in which he's performed well, and I think those games have sort of instilled a certain amount of faith in us, and that faith has been eroded by the way that we've set up, the way that we've played, and the results that we've got against some of the smaller teams.
Yeah, and I would add to that list of bigger teams, Napoli, and possibly Valencia. We'll see how the second leg goes, but certainly on the back of the first leg. And actually, I think that's a sort of more accurate observation than to say this is a guy who's sort of brilliant in the Europa League and not good in the Premier League. I think he is good in the big games and bad against some of the smaller teams. And, you know, we weren't great against the smaller teams in the group stages, even of the Europa League. So I feel like that's accurate, what you've said there. And it's really come to roost, I think, in this recent run. And I think, yeah, it has eroded a lot of the goodwill, hasn't it? I mean, if I look online and look what people are saying about the coach and the way fans feel right now, you know, I think this is definitely the kind of low point for Emery, which, you know, considering we're on the brink of a final, it tells you quite how bad it's been in the league.
Yeah, but I think also it's because of what the league means. It's your bread and butter, you know. That's what you judge your season on, that a cup run, I'm not playing it down in any way, and I sincerely hope that we go all the way in the Europa League, because it would be amazing. You know, it's not really the thing on which you can judge a team and a manager and its players as much as a league campaign. So I think that's what's been really, it's been really disappointing and really disheartening. And I think as well, another part of it is, certainly in relation to yesterday's game, is that we started really brightly. You know, we hit the post early on. Yeah. We were ahead after 9 minutes, you know, and that's usually the thing which allows us to play well, perform well, and achieve a good result, is an early goal. You know, the
and
penalty.
This was a game in which we had kind of an incentive to chase goal difference. You know, I think we'd done a lot of harm to our goal difference in recent weeks, and at the start of this game I was thinking if we can get a few against Brighton, it will really help, and an early goal was exactly what you would have wanted in that respect. But it was almost like that bright start just seemed to fade away, really. And even though Brighton sort of came with almost no ambition, even when they did break forward, they managed to look dangerous. And our defending, I mean, I know they think there are problems in attack as well as defence, but I do think the defending of this team, you know, the way that we conceded the equaliser is just maddening. I really almost am running out of things to say about it.
I mean, do you want to go there? I mean, do you want to talk about anything else in the game between the Aubameyang penalty and the goal and the Brighton goal?
I think both penalties are probably dives. I think. What did you make of it?
I think Monreal's was a dive, and I also think that the Brighton one was soft. My initial thought was that he just sort of went down when he felt Xhaka touch his arm, but I think maybe there was a clip of the heels as well. I'm not 100% on that. I think it was soft, but what I also think about the penalty that we conceded was that we have Anthony Taylor refereeing the game. And if you allow him to make any kind of decision like that, chances are it's not going your way. So I think there was an element of just sheer stupidity on the part of Xhaka in terms of how he defended. We know he's not a good defender. Defensively, his positioning is terrible, his body shape is terrible, his decisions are terrible. You know, the players get the wrong side of him all the time. He hauls them down, he pulls them back. You know, it's not a strength of his.
No.
And I think I would rather he had left the man to drive into the box and we relied on maybe our goalkeeper making a good save, which is not beyond the realms of possibility given how he's been playing lately, or, you know, a centre half getting in the way of it, or somebody else making a block, or Brighton potentially just fucking it up because they're not that good. So it was a stupid decision from Xhaka. And I think we have to as well talk about Mkhitaryan's role in the goal, because he had a simple pass to make outside him. It's like a bread and butter pass, and he just gave it away really, really carelessly. He did chase back, in fairness, you know, but chase back without getting anywhere near the ball. But that was 60 minutes in.
Yeah, there was a lot of time to potentially rescue that. Just on the Mkhitaryan thing, was there another game? Was it the Palace game where he kind of was involved in a sloppy bit of play in midfield and someone scored? I think there was certainly a game recently where that happened, but maybe Wolves, I don't know. But yeah, there was plenty of time to rescue it at that point. I was quite surprised changes weren't made before they were made.
Were you surprised?
77 minutes.
Yeah, were you surprised changes weren't made before Brighton scored? Because I thought we were quite
not
poor.
Particularly.
I thought we were quite poor in that second half. But I was definitely surprised that it took him 17 minutes after Brighton scored to make changes. What did you think of the substitutions?
What did we have? So we had
Iwobi for Lichtsteiner.
Yeah.
Guendouzi for Xhaka and Kolasinac for Mkhitaryan.
I was surprised, particularly by Guendouzi's introduction, I have to say. You know, I could actually see the logic in putting Iwobi and Kolasinac on, but he then put them on separate flanks, which seems strange given that they've got a relatively effective partnership at times. I didn't really see the point in getting Guendouzi on. Like, maybe he was worried about Xhaka having been booked. Maybe he just wanted to haul Xhaka off because he was unhappy with him because of the penalty. I know you said on your blog you would have put Nketiah on. Yeah,
I would have put Nketiah on because we needed a goal, and he's a forward. Yeah. He's a striker. He's young and raw, and we don't know what we're going to get from him. But I tell you what we potentially could get is a goal because he's got that as a player. Guendouzi, this is not to be critical of him per se, but he hasn't made an assist all season long in the Premier League. He hasn't scored a goal all season long in the Premier League. And like you, I could see the logic of putting on Iwobi and Kolasinac because, it gave us somebody on the right-hand side and it gave us somebody on the left-hand side when we went to three at the back. I could see that. But I don't know what Guendouzi was for. And as bad as Xhaka was, and he was really bad in this particular game, he does have the ability to deliver a good ball into the box from a set piece. Now, he didn't. He wasted some opportunities, but, he did have a corner, I think, which Mustafi headed to the near post. The keeper made a good save. I think that was in the first half. He does have some range. So if you're going to take off that guy, why replace him with a guy who doesn't give you anything at all? Anything whatsoever from an attacking point of view in a game when you need a goal?
No, I mean, it was against Valencia, wasn't it? The Xhaka created a goal for Lacazette.
And a good chance for Aubameyang as well. He was terrible. But he ended the game with having created 3 chances for Arsenal yesterday, Xhaka. So, yeah. I
mean, I think what we are sort of talking around here is, we're talking about Guendouzi not having shots, and I think we spoke about that a few weeks ago, but there are 2 players in this team that I would back to score and think might get you a goal, and I just don't think there are almost any others.
All right, let me ask you another question. And I saw people talk about this today, and they said, well, look, what else did he have on the bench? What did he have on the bench, that could have contributed in getting us a goal? And I'm thinking to myself, well, okay, you've got Guendouzi on the bench, right? So he's your midfield cover. Why do you also have El Neni on the bench?
I couldn't agree.
Why couldn't you say, fuck it, maybe I won't ever have to use this kid, and I hope I don't have to use him, but on the off chance that this game is getting away from us, and we need something different, somebody with a bit of a different skill set, why don't you have someone like Saka or Amici on the bench who, in an emergency, which is what we had in this game, you then had another option. Even if you didn't use him, at least you had the potential. You could think about, okay, what if I do this? What if I do that? I think there's a certain amount of caution to Emery that we've talked about in terms of his approach to games and how he asks his team to play, but also in his team selections. I think there might have been room for somebody on that bench who, Eddie Nketiah came off the bench as an 18-year-old to rescue a Carabao Cup game against Norwich, didn't he? There's hit and hope, but it worked. It was at least an option. I don't know what El Neni was going to give us.
I think that's fair. I mean, I get the impression Emery doesn't massively fancy Nketiah, which is absolutely fine if he watches him and thinks he's not ready for the Premier League. But I think, give yourself another option. Give yourself a Xhaka there. There's no need for both Elneny and Guendouzi. I do think that's a fair point. That said, we did create a couple of opportunities and we didn't take them. There
was a big one for Alba, wasn't there, for Aubameyang? So
yeah, where he went for the kind of scissor kick acrobatic attempt. Yeah, I mean, I think that was from a Mkhitaryan cross. I forget now, but that was a really good chance. I'm trying to think if there are any more. There was a ball Iwobi whipped in from the right that just got away from Aubameyang. But, I never felt that we would score particularly.
No, and Brighton looked quite dangerous on the break. They really fucked up. They really fucked up a 2-on-1, and also there was
a good save
from Leno. And I think something that frustrated me was the side of Lacazette in injury time, dropping out to the left wing to pick up the ball and deliver a good ball. I think he did deliver a good cross, but he should be in the middle because he's about the only, along with Aubameyang, the only player we have on the pitch who might score us a goal. And I think that tells you something about the way the team is set up and about the way that we play. I saw an interesting tweet, and I can't remember who it was from, and I apologise. And it was something along the lines of, everyone's wondering what Unai Emery's style of play is. What if this is Unai Emery's style of play? And it was hard not to kind of get on board with that a bit because, why did we beat Valencia? Because basically the two strikers took it upon themselves to drive the team forward. It wasn't, I'm not taking anything away from the win, which was brilliant, and the response from going a goal down, fantastic. But it was more about individuals driving us or pushing us towards a victory than it being a success of our tactical approach on the night. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I think so. It was two excellent strikers making the difference, and that's been the case for quite a lot of this season. I suppose that this is Emery's style. We're witnessing it, aren't we? You can only be judged on what you actually produce. The sort of caveat that I would add to that is that we have midfielders who, in Xhaka, Mkhitaryan, Ozil, theoretically are these great creative players. Why aren't they creating?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's absolutely fair. Is it to do with the individuals and their application, or is it to do with the system and the way that they're being used? Or is it maybe a little from column A, a little from column B?
I think it must be a bit from column A and column B. The whole question of Emery's identity, something I've been thinking about since the game, is that I kind of feel like Emery folded a little bit this season. In some ways, I know that he's been sort of widely lambasted for not playing Ozil and not playing Ramsey, but in some ways I kind of admired him more when he at least took that stance, because I thought, well, that's a bold decision that clearly has a kind of identity in mind. What you're saying is these guys aren't part of the project. We're going in this direction. But when you kind of out of desperation and necessity go, well, I'll let these guys, come back into the team. And I'm not saying they didn't deserve it. I'm not saying they didn't play well upon that, especially Ramsey. He's been brilliant. But I kind of feel at that point, we sort of began to go backwards. I know the results were initially good, but we started looking like last season's Arsenal.
Let me ask you this.
For good and bad.
Sure, okay. So if a manager comes in and takes a hard line on certain issues, and then midway through the season rolls back on those decisions, do you think it might affect the way that he's perceived by the players and thus have an effect on the work that he does and the decisions that he makes? Because they're going, well, if this is what it is now, what's to say in 3 months it won't be something different or the opposite?
Potentially. I mean, the whole Ozil thing, you could read it as, he came back on Emery's terms, or you could read it as, Emery's authority crumbled there. It's very difficult to say without, knowing the intricacies of it. I would say watching the team, I don't, sort of in some ways, most distressingly, I don't get the impression that they've kind of given up. I don't get the impression that they're not attempting to follow instructions. I don't get the impression that they, don't like the coach.
Sure, I'd agree.
I don't know. There were times last season, let's say, in Arsenal's last season, where I thought, I'm not sure these guys buy into this at all anymore. And weirdly, even though the results have been very bad in this run, I've not necessarily had that impression. And there have been times where I've seen players seemingly working pretty hard, but just not producing and not having quality. Yeah. And that's in some ways more concerning, because it's like, well, it's easy to just go, well, they don't, they've sold the manager out, bang, replace him. But I'm not quite sure that is where we are. It's a real head scratcher though. There are so many different reasons that we've been so bad of late.
What else have you got in your notes? I'm curious.
What else have I got in my notes? I've got something about the Aubameyang missed chances. I saw a lot of criticism for him after that game, and I do kind of think it's a bit ludicrous. He scored 25 goals,
26, isn't it?
26 now, sorry.
I don't think it's ludicrous, because I understand the frustration behind it. He is a guy who misses a lot of chances, and when you're in a bad run of form, when you do what we did against, who was it? Rennes, was it, at home? Where he scored a couple and then missed a couple late on, but the game was pretty much won. I think, what was it, 3-0 at that point? Yeah. You can sort of suffer a couple of misses at 3-0, but when you really badly need a goal and he misses a chance that you would expect a striker of his quality and ability to score, I understand the frustration. I would say, though, that I do think that a 26-goal striker is about the least of our problems. I think we have got other priorities when it comes to our team and rebuilding. The idea that we should sacrifice somebody who's contributed. We can't on one hand say this is a team which lacks goal scorers and then sanction the departure of the leading goal scorer in the team. I don't know that makes any sense. Actually, I know that makes absolutely no sense. So I get the frustration, but at the same time, we have to contextualize it, compartmentalize it to an extent.
Well, I'm just thinking on the top of my head here, thinking out loud, but is part of the frustration the fact that he misses a lot of chances? And we're saying there's only two, if you take Ramsey out, two players in this team who sort of score goals. Is it possible that it's kind of a function of Emery's system or style that the chances kind of only fall to the strikers? That the midfield is constructed in such a way that goal scoring opportunities don't really come to other players, and therefore when that striker, be it Aubameyang, misses a couple of chances, it's that much more problematic.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't really thought about it, but we do tend to create most of our chances by cutbacks into the box. And who's in the box? Either your strikers or somebody who's really good at arriving into the box at the right time, someone like Aaron Ramsey.
Yeah, so, and if you've got Ozil as a number 10, the chances are he's not. That's not his skill set necessarily. No. Xhaka doesn't get into the box. Torreira doesn't get into the box. Guendouzi, Elneny, they rarely run beyond the penalty area mark. So that might be a factor. And Kolasinac does get in behind, but never really looks to shoot. Probably on instruction, one would suspect, because I feel like last season he did shoot a little bit more frequently. So that might be part of it. I mean, all my other notes really are about sort of what this means and what it means for the coach and what it means for, I think, next season realistically, because you know, I saw there were a couple of questions saying, "Oh, you know, what do we do now against Burnley?" And I'm sort of like, it doesn't matter what we do now against Burnley.
No, Burnley,
you know?
fuck Burnley. It makes no difference.
Like, we've fucked that already.
There's no, like, we cannot have an 8-goal turnaround with Tottenham. It's just that there's no point even considering that. So forget Burnley. Our season rests on what we do on Thursday against Valencia, and then all going well there, if we get to the final, what we do in that particular game, that is where that's where this season rests. I mean, what if we didn't have the potential for a Europa League final? And we, you know, let's say we'd gone out against Napoli. Mm-hmm. I know it's just playing hypotheticals here. But if we'd just gone out against Napoli, but we still had that great position in the Premier League with games against mid-table, not particularly high-quality opposition, where maybe 2 wins, a couple of wins and a couple of draws out of 6 or 7 games will get us into the top 4, and we did what we did, what would your thoughts be on the future of the manager then?
Well, I would contend that maybe without those Europa League games, I think we might have acquired a few more points along the way.
That's a fair point, and I absolutely take that on board. Okay.
But let's say that we didn't. I think it would be... I'd be pretty despondent. It feels bad now.
Yeah.
And that's with a possible final on the horizon. So I think it would be incredibly disheartening. There's no two ways about it. It's disheartening as it is. So I think it would be really tough to take, and I think it would leave me feeling very disappointed in the way that this season is sort of...
It is. It is very, very disheartening, isn't it? It really is very...
Is the reason that it's most disheartening, and maybe this isn't correct, but is the reason that it's most disheartening that on some level, when we changed our coach, we changed our manager, we felt that some of the problems and the ills in this team and this club could be rather quickly fixed? And is a lot of what's disheartening about it the reality that this looks a lot like stuff we've seen in the last few years?
Perhaps, but also the fact that I think at points during this season, we could look at things and say, he is addressing certain issues, right?
Yeah.
Like defensively, in terms of the ground we cover in games, in terms of tactical flexibility is something we talk about a lot. I think during this season, we've all been able to see times when Unai Emery has looked to address some of the failings that we've had over the last couple of years, and has done so successfully, I think, to a not to a large extent, but at times has addressed those issues. But now, despite doing that, we're kind of more or less in the same position in terms of how many goals we've conceded. I think we've conceded 50 this season, and we conceded 51 last season. You know, there's stats doing the round over the weekends about, you know, our XG last season compared to this season.
Doesn't make for good reading.
No, you know, and the expected goals against last season versus this season, we're worse. You know, and you can talk about whatever you like about stats and whether they tell you anything or whatever, but, you know, just as part of the conversation, I'm not saying it's the be-all and end-all, but as part of the conversation, using those stats to inform us about our performance over the course of a season, it doesn't make for great reading.
No, I know it's been a good year for XG in that respect. I mean, you know, they warned of Arsenal's regression after the 22-match unbeaten run. They warned of Manchester United's regression under Solskjaer, and those have been borne out, you know, despite some scoffing from certain quarters. So you can't really argue with that. I don't know. I'm kind of stumbling on this sort of narrative, and I don't know if it tallies with the results particularly well yet, but I do feel like when Emery came in, there was an injection of something, and I think there was tangible evidence of that on the pitch. Certainly in the work rate of the players, it seemed like there was a focus and a physical competitiveness that felt new and felt different, and I think that was reflected in a bit of the change of the emphasis of the team. Certain players became more important. People like Torreira came in, Socrates came in, Iwobi became more important almost on account of his physicality. It felt like there was Kolasinac is another. It felt like there was a shift in that direction, and I do think that the Liverpool game and maybe the bad run after Christmas, and I feel like Emery kind of lost his way. I do think he lost his way. And weirdly, I think losing his way did sort of also come with a bit of an upturn in results. You know, he started deploying Ramsey and Ozil and, you know, using the strikers in different ways. And it worked better, to be honest. It was getting us some better results. But I sort of can't help but shake the idea that he somehow divorced himself from his plan.
Whatever the plan was that we were still trying to figure out.
Yeah, but I think at least he might have known, you know?
He might have known. And I think in fairness, it's worth pointing out that I think the players, you know, very much bought into this when he arrived, because you couldn't move for articles about all the things that Unai Emery had done that we weren't doing before. And the players, you know, we loved the training and we loved the attention to detail and we loved the preparation about the opposition and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So, you know, it's not a case that, you know, the players weren't into this too. You know, it's just we seem to have hit a wall at exactly the wrong time this season. And you know, I think the way we've blown the position we were in is hugely worrying.
Absolutely, and I feel like the way in which he has shifted has been to be honest, it's not that dissimilar from what we saw Arsene Wenger doing at times. I hate to keep evoking him, but a kind of short-term pragmatism, a sense of, you know, I just somehow need to get this team over the line. Yeah. And sort of almost shifting away from ideals in order to do that. And I think that it has eroded his authority. I think it's eroded fans' trust in him. I would also say I think there are a couple of other factors here at play.
Go on.
I think that the players, you know, all that running, I do think probably is going to catch up with them. And I think it has done. And I don't think we're seeing as much of it. I don't think we're seeing the players covering quite as much ground as they were. I think that injuries have definitely been a factor. And I think the more I think about it, January, as much as I try and twist some logic to it. Yeah. And think, they were keeping their powder dry. I think that was a disaster.
Yep, I agree. And actually, the only note that I made this week, it reads January decision. Yeah. And I wanted to ask you what you thought, like, who has made that decision?
Well, who has made this play out? Because Emery was talking about making signings, and then he came out in the press and said the club cannot make signings. And I thought that was crystal clear that that's not his call.
No. I mean, look, come on. You know, whatever else, you know, he's a man who knows, certainly knew in January he had a squad that needed at least one addition and probably two. Leaving aside the whole, it's very difficult to buy players in January, we all get it. You know, I think we all could see that. He could see that. He knew that. And he talked in particular about the Rob Holding injury, about the need maybe to go out and buy a central defender, that this now will prompt us into the market to get a central defender. I'm wondering about January, and I'm wondering who it was that said there is no money available. Remember the interview that Raul Sanllehi did with he did the rounds. He met all the press people. He was on BBC with David Ornstein. I think he met Amy Lawrence, and he did, you know, a few other bits and pieces. The two of them where they were look at us, we're great. We've got amazing plans, etc., etc. But they were at pains to point out that, like, January is not the time when they were really thinking about spending money in the transfer market. However, what sort of got to me was the idea that, you know, on early January, every department in Arsenal, every part of the club got an email missive telling them to cut costs wherever possible. There was no like Happy New Year. It was, we need to cut costs, so wherever you can cut costs, do it. And that was across the board, business and everything else. Do we think that didn't apply to football? I don't think so. You know, whatever about like fucking Johnny who runs a stationery cupboard, don't buy as many Post-its and fucking Tipex pens, whatever. You could save up to £16 a week on that. But, you know, it's player sales or player purchases and all that, which really costs money. And like, imagine we're a club that has, you know, decided or made a decision not to spend any money in January, or to spend no money on players that we could actually use in January, and we've blown £4 million on Denis Suarez because the loan fee apparently was somewhere in the region of £2.5 million, and we paid his wages as well. I mean, that's a disaster.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I'm not here to defend the Denis Suarez signing. I have seen some people saying, you know, well, look, Emery says he wants his players, and when he had the opportunity, he went and got Denis Suarez, you know?
Yeah.
But he was working on ridiculous constraints, in my opinion.
Oh, I agree.
He could only loan players, you know what I mean? And he couldn't even put in like a permanent obligation to buy. Like, that's why we were looking at Suarez, Perisic. If, you know, he didn't have any money to spend, and he thought, I want to try and get someone to improve the squad. Now, granted, that didn't work. It was a disastrous signing. But, you know, I look at this table and I see us 6 points off, and I hear people saying, yeah, we should have won a couple of those games. I can't help but think 2 signings could have meant at least 6 points. So their recruitment is the fundamental driver in football, isn't it? I mean, people buy success. That's how it works.
Yes.
People buy good players and they do well.
That's the reality. So do you think it was Raul Sanllehi saying, well, you know, look at the budget that we have. Arsenal are set to make apparently a big loss in the next financial year.
Big loss, according to the Arsenal Supporters Trust.
Somewhere in the region, potentially, of £70 million. So is that Raul Sanllehi saying, well, what little budget we have to maximise, therefore the summer is the best time to spend money because better players are available. You know, clubs are willing to let players go in the summer that they're not necessarily willing to let go in January. Maybe you don't have to pay a premium to get a player. Like if you want to prize somebody away early, you got to pay a bit more. Is that Sanllehi being pragmatic about the money that the club have to spend in the transfer market? Or is it from higher up? And they're saying, look, you're not allowed. There is no money to spend. You can't do it. I mean, where do we think that is?
I think you have to think maybe it's higher up. And whoever made that decision
is a
cunt. In my opinion, well, I'm not disagreeing. And I think it could have cost us. And that's, you know, none of this is to absolve Emery and say he shouldn't have coached those players to get more points than they did. But I do think when you look at the massive dip in our form at the end of the season, a failure to strengthen in January coupled with the injuries that we suffered has to be a big factor in that.
Yes. Because
the defensive platform that we had, which was never great, you know, our defensive problems run deep. But when we looked at it, it's our best. Rob Holding was generally involved. Hector Bellerin was involved. We lost those players. We lost Danny Welbeck. We subsequently lost the ability to rotate Aubameyang and Lacazette to provide freshness, to have someone who had pace on the wing. These are big elements of our squad that just disappeared without replacement.
Yeah.
And I know we can sit and say, it'd be nice to see him each, but realistically, it shouldn't come to that. It shouldn't come to that.
No, I agree with you. And, you know, whatever concerns or whatever I have about Unai Emery, one of the things I've said consistently is that he was not backed in the January transfer window at a point where he really needed it, you know. We lost 3 big players in 2 months. Holding, Bellerin, Welbeck, gone for the whole season. And I think, I mean, look, I'm speculating, but I think if we had a fit Hector Bellerin, a fit Rob Holding, and a fit Danny Welbeck all season, I think we probably would be in the top 4. And I also think I agree with you that if we had actually gone out and replaced them properly, even if it was a loan signing or two, like a decent loan signing or two, then I don't think we'd be quite in the depths of despair as we are right now.
No, I mean, I know, Perisic is a player with his problems, but he probably would have scored a couple of goals along the way. I mean, it is kind of maddening. And when you think back to the closure of the summer transfer window, I think we forget now, because we actually have signed a few players. We signed like half a dozen players, whatever it was. But when the transfer window closed, I think the general sense among Arsenal fans was, well, that we left some work to do there.
Yeah.
People were thinking about another centre-half, a wide player, a central midfielder maybe. None of that happened. And January rolled around, we were even more in need of players. And it didn't happen again. And yeah, I think it's a huge, huge factor in the story of our season. And I don't know. I don't know what it means about the owner. I don't know what it means about what the directors think of Unai Emery, because ultimately I think they slightly hung him out to dry in January. And to be fair, he's made a mess of it off his own back in the last few weeks, but they didn't do him any favours at all.
Let me just again throw it out there without any knowledge or anything else. Do you think perhaps their unwillingness to back him in January says something about what they think about him in general, or is that putting 2 and 2 together to get 5?
I don't know. I think we kind of know that already. I think because the nature of the contract he was given. It's not like they handed him a 5-year deal, the keys to the city. It was always a relatively short-term thing. And I think he's always been kind of seen as a sort of safe pair of hands for an awkward transition. But I think it's more about trying to save money, ultimately.
Yeah.
That's what I think is driving it. I think they spent a lot in January, they spent a fair bit in the summer, and they thought, we don't want to do that again.
I mean, we talk about spending a lot in the summer, but we spent on 5 players while Liverpool spent on 1, basically.
Absolutely, and we also cost ourselves, 70 million quid by not selling players whose contracts were a year from expiry, which is a completely idiotic decision. And actually, that was one of the other things yesterday that I found really infuriating. The sort of post-match ceremony with Ramsey and the surprise, Danny Welbeck's officially leaving as well, just for the people who stayed around to see it. That should have been a happy occasion. And granted, I wasn't there, couldn't be there, but watching it through the television, I just found myself being so wound up.
What in particular wound you up?
Just how much money we've left on the table.
Yeah.
I really like Aaron Ramsey. I think he's a great guy. I was touched at how emotional he was. I don't necessarily interpret that emotion the same way as other people. I think some people have seen that and said, wow, he really didn't want to leave. I kind of think maybe he did want to leave, but he spent 11 years of his life there.
Yeah.
It's still an emotional occasion, whatever happens. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree.
I don't think these were tears of, I've been forced out against my will. I think they were tears of, I'm leaving this behind. And I'm sad to see Ramsey go. That's a decision I found a little bit crazy, to be honest, depending on what we do. I mean, we've just essentially forced ourselves to replace a player in a summer where we have other work to do. But yeah, I mean, we could have doubled our transfer budget by selling those players.
Absolutely. I agree, and I love Aaron Ramsey, and people give me a hard time over on Arseblog News on the player ratings because I'm maybe a bit too generous at times towards him. But you can't leave if he had 2 years left in his contract, he's a 40-50 million pound player. And like in an ideal world, when I look at this Arsenal squad, Aaron Ramsey is the player kind of that you should be rebuilding around.
Of course, yeah,
right? But, you know, in an ideal world where a hamstring strain doesn't put him out for 3 months. So I take that into account as well. But I also think, you know, when you let an England international like Welbeck run down his contract when he could have brought you in 20 million last summer, you know, it's just terrible. And I think we should take a moment to call Ivan Gazidis a prick. Just, you know,
And that's the other story of this season, by the way. Just the backroom bullshit that I think has massively derailed us.
That's what worries me so profoundly, is that Ivan Gazidis, after spending 9 years subjugated to Arsene Wenger, right? Where he had no real power or control, flexed his muscles for a couple of months at the end when he brought in, you know, and was the driver, and people can point to Wenger all they want, but I know this for a fact. Gazidis was the driver behind the Mkhitaryan deal, behind the Ozil contract. Like, it was ultimately, he was the one who greenlit those deals. Bringing in Aubameyang, and I've got no problem with bringing in Aubameyang whatsoever. But after all that time, when Arsene left, you would have thought, okay, here it is. We've got a new manager. We've got a chief executive. We've got a technical or a head of football. We've got a head of recruitment. It's all there for Gazidis to say, okay, now let me take this club forward. Let me drive the ambition of Arsenal that I've always talked about. He couldn't get the fuck out fast enough. And that's really worrying for me. Really worrying. Because, you know, he's up close and personal with it all.
Yeah, and I wonder if, you know, that was at the end of the summer transfer window, that was all going on with Milan. And I suspect that might have had an impact on not selling Ramsey. You know, maybe there were question marks over who could make a decision on that scale.
Eyes were not on the ball.
And when January came round, and I'm talking about how we should have strengthened, our head of recruitment was already had 1 foot out the door. So that stuff, which I'll be honest, when Arsene went, for all my doubts about Gazidis, that sort of team was what really gave me hope that we might be able to build a sort of modern football club.
Yeah.
And that's completely gone down the pan. And that's, I think, why so much of the attention now is falling on Emery, because he has been, having been brought in as a coach, he's now been sort of pushed out as the front man. You know, he's the focus.
Well, he's the focus again because nobody else is out in front. And, you know, I've been critical of Emery and you know, I don't think he's had a very good spell as head coach of this football club, but there's nobody else taking any of the heat off him. Same way that Gazidis did not poke his head above the parapet when things were going wrong for Arsene Wenger. The minute he was gone, he was sitting in the manager's chair doing a press conference talking about how much he loved the guy, but when shit was going down and planes were flying and banners were going around, where the fuck was Gazidis? Nowhere. So where the fuck is Raul Sanyehi now? You know, where are the words of comfort, or where are the words of reassurance from our head of football, the man who is going to absolutely 100% be responsible for our summer and everything else? Where is it? You know, because you're either a team and you're a football club that's all driving towards the same thing, and you're, you know, or what? What is it? It's like individual power plays. We've got these cowardly executives. I don't know how we keep doing it. We managed to buy all these footballers who are just kind of mentally brittle, and we get all these executives who just fucking hide under the table until it's safe to come out.
Yeah, Arsenal are a spectacularly badly run football club.
Yes.
And I think their transfer business in particular is pretty disastrous. And I feel like we're now moving into an era where we might be hamstrung by ownership and spending restrictions.
Yeah.
You know,
let's say it, because ultimately it stops, or the book stops, or it starts with the owners. And that's KSE, that's Stan Kroenke, that's Josh Kroenke. They've got a big, big summer ahead of them, big summer. I don't expect a great deal. I don't expect a lot. But I'm going to wait until I see what they do this summer before I go postal.
Well, there's huge pressure on them now, I think, to deliver something.
Well, there is. There's only pressure if they care.
Yeah, that's true.
Sorry about that.
A scary thought.
Just taking you down. Listen, I think we should take a break because we've got loads of questions that we can do in part 2. We're an hour in. I think we should both get a drink.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea.
Not a bad idea. Let's go get a drink, come back and do questions and more in part 2 right after this. Welcome back to the Arsecast Extra. This is part 2 of the show where we answer questions that you sent to us on Twitter at Gunnerblog and at Arseblog. Are we still trending, by the way? I don't know.
I hope so.
Let me just check.
Someone else tweeted us about it, so I guess it must be somewhere.
No, I don't think we are. Mike Dean is trending now in our place.
Oh, for God's sake.
What the fuck has he done? What has he done now?
All people.
He's probably made love to a football in the middle of whatever game it is he's refereeing tonight. Is he refereeing Manchester City versus Leicester? I hope he's frotting Brendan Rodgers as we speak. Anyway, look, on Twitter, at Gunnerblog, at Arseblog, on the Arseblog Facebook page, facebook.com/the Arseblog. Also on the Arseblog Discord chat server, which you get access to if you're an Arseblog member on Patreon, patreon.com/Arseblog. A $5 a month gets you loads of extra stuff to listen to, and also you get the Arsecast and you get the Arsecast Extra ad-free. So if you want to sign up, do it now. Patreon.com/Arseblog. Feels quite bad, actually, being knocked off Twitter trending by Mike Dean.
Yeah, that's salting our wounds, I would say.
Whatever about a royal baby, but Mike Dean...
Unless they've named the baby Mike Dean. And that's why that's trending.
Yeah. Wow.
Mike Dean Windsor.
Most babies look like Mike Dean anyway, so, who would know the difference?
That's true.
Yeah. Do you want to go first? Will I go first? How will we do this?
Let's let you go first.
Okay. This is a question from Discord. It comes from Mamos, the Norwegian Gooner, who's a Norwegian Gooner from Norway, which is in Norway. And he says, what the fuck should we do about Xhaka? Seems like he's one of a handful of players that could actually generate some funds. He's usually a good player, but in my opinion, he has these nightmare games too often. Would you sell him?
I would be very tempted to. I know that we're quite reliant on him, but it feels to me like relying on Granit Xhaka is quite a dangerous position to be in.
It's a bit like he's a walking stick. He's a walking stick. Like, you have to use him because he's the only thing you've got. But if you could get a bionic leg, that will be much better.
That's it. I mean, people say our style is kind of contingent on Xhaka, and I think there's something in that, but our style is not massively successful, and playing Xhaka just leaves you open to these moments of madness. I mean, it was madness what he did against Brighton, and not for the first time in an Arsenal shirt. There was just no need. It was like it's like his body sort of acted without him being able to control it. He just flung that arm out.
It's almost as if he's a bit thick. At times on the pitch, he seems like a pretty good guy off it and everything else, but like his decision making on the pitch at times really leaves.
He makes bad decisions.
He does.
He makes bad decisions.
He makes bad decisions.
So yes, I think he is a viable asset to move on. I think we could probably get a decent chunk of money for him, and I wouldn't be averse to it because I kind of think the centre of midfield and the centre of defence, we could rip it all up and start again, frankly.
Yeah.
I think we probably should, in a way.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily put it as one of my priorities.
No.
But if the right offer came in, I would absolutely sell him. No problem. And actually, just on this, let me follow up with a question from Jane Cavendish, who says, we have inept defenders who make repeated and costly errors, but is our main defensive problem a midfield that can't press? Man City and Liverpool have improved their defensive records by improving their shot suppression and not allowing teams to get at their back fours in the first place. They've each conceded 22 goals this season. We've conceded 50. So should our first priority be a midfield that can do the same? What do we do with players like Xhaka and Iwobi, who are good passers of the ball but aren't mobile and effectively prevent us from playing a modern pressing game?
I think that's a really good point, and something I've been thinking about this week is I've been thinking about fullbacks. Did you read Ken Early's piece about how football has shifted? And one of the things he was talking about in it, and we've seen a little evidence of it at Arsenal this season, is how crosses and sometimes assists are primarily coming from fullbacks now. I mean, I think Andy Robertson's already broken the assist record for a defender in a Premier League season. And Trent Alexander-Arnold isn't that far away. And I was thinking about those two and how they're probably the best pair of fullbacks in the league. And I was thinking about if you put them in this Arsenal team, and I think we would feel like they were too attacking for us to somehow survive it. You know, we'd say, oh, well, if they're going to play, we've got to play with a back three, you know?
Yeah.
And then what that tells you, I think, is that your real problems are in central defence and in your midfield, because Liverpool can play fullbacks. I mean, Andy Robertson, you know, starts on the halfway line, and so does Alexander-Arnold. It's not a problem for them because they have centre halves. Well, they have Van Dijk, who really marshals the defence very well, and they have a midfield who can press and who can protect the defence, and we just do not have those things.
Isn't that what, like, basically Wenger's best teams were based on? Fullbacks
Absolutely.
Playing so high up the pitch, and the reason they were able to do it was because we had players like Vieira, we had Gilberto, we had, you know, Edu, we had players who were able to protect the back four, and when we had, you know, our best teams, we had good back fours as well, you know, so
and City and Liverpool are teams full of sprinters, really. I mean, you know, who cover a lot of ground very, very quickly, and we don't have many of those.
Well, when you think about our central midfield, it's so
pedestrian.
Like Xhaka, I think in the player ratings yesterday, I think I said it was something like a performance of such leaden-footed brutality that I don't have words to describe it. And it, you know, it was so obvious during the game. I was watching it during the game, and people have, you know, I'm not the first or I won't be the last to make this observation about Xhaka and how he's not the quickest at moving the ball. So when he receives the ball, he takes a touch, and he's on the turn, and then he looks around and he makes a pass or what have you. But, you know, he's not that mobile. He's not that quick. Torreira maybe is. Guendouzi possibly is. Elneny is definitely not. Aaron Ramsey is not really somebody who's a traditional central midfielder, but certainly is mobile and athletic and able to move the ball maybe a bit too quickly at times. But for the most part, our central midfield is slow. It's really slow. And in a game when inches and fine margins make such a difference, you know, you can't pull the opposition all over the place if the ball is travelling through your midfield like it's going through treacle.
No, and he can't carry the ball. I think sometimes we're a bit beguiled by the beauty of Xhaka's passing. I mean, he can play some extraordinary passes. It's a hell of a left foot that he's got. But look at that Liverpool team. Players like Gigi Wijnaldum, Jordan Henderson. You know, they're not as technically competent as Xhaka is in that regard. They're not as special passers of the ball, but they have other attributes that make them much more rounded. And I feel like Xhaka is such a specialist player who has such a unique skill. He's, that kind of quarterback. But I just think the other areas of his game don't effectively balance that out.
Yeah, I'd say.
Yeah.
If we got the right offer and the right money came in and we had anyone at the club who might fucking make a decision about, who would be a good replacement for him, absolutely. That's another worry.
Yeah,
Who's fucking picking the players? Who's picking the players?
Well, I mean, yeah, I'll get to that. I mean, as for Jane's point on pressing, I think one of the hardest things to understand about this Arsenal team is why they press when they do and why they don't when they don't. You know, in some games it feels like we press from the front. We make quite a good fist of it, to be honest. I can think of several games this season, particularly at home, where we've done that effectively, and then other occasions where we just haven't. That's something I don't understand. Yeah. And I have to hold my hands up and say I'm not sure what the logic is there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's partly physical, but that is also tactical,
sure.
I would say.
Okay.
Who's making the decisions? Good question. I think I had a question about this. I mean, this comes from @TalkingArse, and he says, between pushing Mislintat out the club and failing to appoint a director of football, has Raul Sanllehi fucked our summer?
Well, look, I can't predict the future. I can't say if he's fucked our summer. I'd say he has made it more difficult. And what he's also done is assumed the entire responsibility for what goes on this summer. Yeah. He is the head of football. Is that not? That's his title, isn't it? Head of football.
I think it is, yeah.
So all the football decisions at Arsenal now are on him. And, you know, it was partly down to him that Sven left. You know, there was this kind of... I remember writing about this maybe just after Wenger left, or it was announced that he left, and it was sort of, you know, we put in place this structure, the Sven, Ivan, Raul structure, and I was thinking, you know...
Maybe it won't survive, yeah.
Maybe it won't survive, or, you know, when there is a power vacuum, somebody... It's not unusual for there to be a couple of casualties along the way, for somebody else to sort of, you know, in a utopian world, Ivan does his thing and Sven does his thing and Raul does his thing, and they all, you know, sit around together and play hacky sack and they love each other. But in reality, these are kind of hard-nosed guys who want the power. Yeah, with egos, and they want the power and they want the influence. And the guy ultimately who's left, who's come out on top of it, is Raul Sanllehi. So I can't say for sure whether he's fucked our summer. It's, you know, he could surprise us. Could he not? He could surprise us and do something amazing during the off-season. But I think what he has done is made it very... There's no hiding place for him. There's no hiding place for him. If we don't buy well... And if we don't sell well this summer, it's on him. There's nobody else. Like, we can talk about Emery getting involved in player recruitment and all that stuff, you know, and the Denis Suarez influence and all that. But ultimately, the man who's sanctioning and green-lighting the decisions from a footballing point of view is Sanllehi. So if it goes fucking tits up this summer, it's on him. And we get the pitchforks out and we go round to Raul's house and whatever. But it's on him. But I think we have to wait and see. We have to wait and see what they do. Whether they've got big plans, and, you know, we'll wait and see. But it's him. It's him. It's Sanllehi. And the worry I have, of course, is, you know, obviously the Kroenke side of things. Mm-hmm. But I'm not sure he's like he's not a talent guy. He's not the guy who's going to go out and identify the players, and the people that we have currently doing the scouting are still relics is not the right word, but they're still people who were involved in Arsenal during the Wenger era for a long time.
Of the previous regime.
They're part of the previous regime. They're part of the poor recruitment process that we've had in place for so many years now. So all of a sudden we're expecting this guy who, you know, to what? Pull a load of irons out of the hat? You pull rabbits out of a hat. You pull irons out of a fire. You know, but all of a sudden, like a guy who's got his who's done what for us in like 15 years, 20 years, he's now going to be the guy who's going to make... I'm not confident about what's going to happen this summer. I'm really not. I'd love it. No. If I'm wrong, I will eat the biggest slice of humble pie that exists on this earth. But just looking at it and looking at who's involved, I'm not confident.
It is hard to feel confident, definitely. Have you got a question?
I do. It comes from Mike Gooty, who's at Mike Gooty 4, who says, which season-long injury do you think hurt us most? What does that say about our squad and how Emery has had to adapt?
I think the best player we lost is Hector Bellerin, but I have a suspicion that I don't know. I want to say Danny Welbeck, actually.
Yeah, I would too. Even though I think we've got terrible problems defensively. I just think that the lack of goals and the lack of something different, like he's not the best player in the world by any stretch of the imagination, Welbeck. But he gave you like real pace. He gave you somebody who would run with the ball. He could do it on the left. He could do it on the right. He could support the strikers. He could play with both Lacazette and Aubameyang. He could play in place of both of them too. I think he would have got maybe another 5 or 6 goals.
Yeah.
And I think those goals would have proved to be quite valuable in terms of points. And I think for me, I would say Welbeck, not because he was our best player, but because he had the things that we missed most.
Yes, I think that's absolutely fair. And I think what he would have been of real benefit to Aubameyang and Lacazette, even if it meant they were fresher for certain Premier League games because he'd taken up more European minutes or more cup minutes. I think we've missed him enormously. I've got this question here from Catherine Shah, who's at Educated Gooner. And Catherine says, do you think it was the club's decision or Emery's decision to let Welbeck go?
I don't think it was Emery's decision.
It doesn't sound like it.
No, but I don't think Emery... I mean,
it was Welbeck's decision in part, I suspect.
Of course. He got to a year out and then he said, look, I'm going to be 28. I can leave on a Bosman, which opens so many doors for him. Rather than being available on a transfer. He's available for free. I think it will open many more doors for him than he would have had available to him if he'd, had to be a transfer. So I don't think it was on Emery at all. I think, it comes back to last summer when we had decisions to make on Ramsey and when we had decisions to make on Welbeck. And our decision was to gamble on being able to convince them to stay with a year left on their contract. And I don't think that either one of them really wanted to, for various reasons. I just don't think they wanted to. I think they looked at it and said, it's too much. It's too much change if we let Wenger go, if we bring in 5 players. I can't even remember who left last year. Who left?
I don't know.
Coquelin. Did he leave in the summer or was it?
Was that January? I think.
Okay, Gabriel left. Mertesacker retired, but he was barely playing anyway.
So Lucas Perez went to West Ham. Is that right?
Goodness. Yeah, £15 million loss. Yeah.
Jack Wilshere went out on a free transfer. Yeah. Santi Cazorla went out on a free transfer. Mm-hmm. Callum Chambers and David Ospina went out on loan.
Yeah.
I think that's it. I think Coquelin went in January.
Coquelin went in January the year before, didn't he?
Yeah.
It was the year before. So I think basically they said it's too much. It's too much to do if we have to replace Ramsey and we have to replace Welbeck, as well as signing Leno, Lichtsteiner, Torreira, Guendouzi, and Socrates. I think they said it was too much, and hindsight's a wonderful thing, but I don't think it would have been in the long term if they had any long-term strategy for the club. We would have been better off with £70 million, even if we could only spend it in January, than losing Ramsey and Welbeck for free. I think.
I think absolutely. Absolutely. This question comes in from how are they pronouncing that? Eababs, who's at Eisco on Twitter. It's not a cheerful one. They ask, if we don't invest creatively into the squad for next season, Do you fear we may struggle to hold on to our top 6 status?
Well, look, we are only 3 points off third.
Yeah. I mean, we're only 10 points off 7th.
Yeah, look, I think the general stature of the club and everything else means that there's a big, big gap for clubs like Wolves and Watford and Everton and what have you to bridge. I think it's too big, but I also understand that, I mean, we've got more points this season than last season. So, you know, the trajectory, if you want to look at it from a purely points point of view rather than performance or anything else, you could say it's been arrested. I don't really have any worry in that regard. But my worry is more about how are we going to get back into the Champions League? And I'm not thinking about, at this moment in time, Arsenal dropping out of the top 6. I'm thinking about how can we get back into the top 4, and then how can we get back into the top 2? And I know that's ludicrous, but that's kind of where I envisage the ideal trajectory for us, right?
Yeah, I am still looking up more than down.
Hoping against hope that might happen, but
when I look at Wolves and I look at Everton, I see 2 clubs with an ownership that I think will be really ambitious and will definitely do everything they can to break that top 6 monopoly. I mean, those clubs will spend money, absolutely certainty. So, yeah, I mean,
it will become more difficult.
I'm not worried about it, but yes, I think there will be a challenge from that sort of level of club. But we should be thinking about trying to get into the top 4, really.
Yeah, we should. Here's a question from a couple of ones here from Nicholas Nielsen, who's at Den Nielsen 88. I see what you did there, Nicholas. He said Lacazette to Barcelona for £70 million. Should we let him go and invest in new players / contract renewals? And Magnus Holmberg, rumours linking Lacazette to Barca. For what amount of money, if any, or what combination of money and players would you let him join them?
Whatever made us better. And I'm nothing I've read makes me think that would be the case. I would be keeping Aubameyang and Lacazette. I think they are the good thing we've got going in this team.
Yeah. Holy shit. I mean, we should not be considering selling either of those, regardless of how difficult the rebuilding job is and regardless of how tight funds are. We've got to keep the things about this team that are good. And Lacazette is good. Not just on the pitch, but I love his attitude. I love that, he's got a good character, good personality. He, along with Aubameyang, even think about it from the point of view of their relationship. They love playing together. I think I was listening to the Arsenal Vision podcast after the Valencia game, and Clive was saying they're basically an old-fashioned partnership.
Yeah,
an old-fashioned strike partnership. And those things are rare. We don't have them too much anymore. And maybe they're a touch anachronistic. But at the same time, if you were to go through, as we did last week, the squad and say keep or go, both of those are keep. And I think we need to build, around those guys. So no, I wouldn't let him go to Barcelona. No chance.
No. Fuck those guys, to be honest.
Yeah, fuck Barcelona too. Yeah.
Okay, my question.
Yeah.
Well, I had one about if the club got an offer for Aubameyang. I think we've just answered that.
Yeah. Do you want me to do another one, or have you got one?
Oh, yeah. If you've got one lined up, you go.
I've got one here from Chris Carpenter, who's at AFC Freddy 8. And he says, going against a heavy grain here, I'm sure, but I'm of the belief that we've had a lot more positives this season than negatives. So in your view, Why is it that our fans are so utterly negative with so much this season after getting what the majority wanted last summer?
I think that the simple answer to that is this terrible run of form. I think that there's been positives in the course of the season. We've had some great occasions where we've beaten rival teams. I'm thinking of Chelsea, Manchester United, Tottenham, and we have enjoyed those days enormously. But I think it's difficult to remember that and sort of gain that sense of perspective when you are in the midst of a diabolical run that will probably allow most of those teams to finish above you. Because ultimately, individual games tend to matter less than where you sit in the Premier League table at the end of the season. And we've let a huge opportunity slip through our hands. Now, I do think it's possible that this is just a bad run. I think I'm one of the few who thinks that. But I think we are just in a terrible, terrible run. It's been the only terrible run of the season and a hugely costly one. But I think it's possible that it sort of will end and be an isolated thing.
What makes you think that? Just as a matter of interest, what is it about these players and the way they've been sent out to play that makes you think this could be just an aberration, a dreadful run of form that they're just simply unable to address for no particular reason?
I think the main factor in that is probably fatigue.
Okay.
That's what I would go for.
So you're a deeper squad with greater quality.
Yeah. I mean, lack of quality is an issue too. Don't get me wrong.
For sure.
I'm not saying that. I think this team are necessarily good enough to even play in the Champions League. But I don't know. I just feel like this has been so painful, and we've been so close to achieving our goals that to let it slip through our grasp in this manner has made people really angry and really disappointed. I'm not sure that's being negative though necessarily. I think it's fair enough to feel like that.
Okay.
What do you think?
I do think that I think what it is a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
I think we realistically, pragmatically could all sit back at the start of the season and say, if Arsenal were in fifth with a game to go, we'd all say, yeah, based on the squad we have, that's probably about right. I think we can all see that. But when you're handed a really, really kind run-in, and you've got games against Crystal Palace and Brighton at home, and with all due respect, blah, 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 to Watford Watford, but Wolves, Leicester, who else? Who is the other cunts we lost to recently?
Palace.
Yeah. When you look at those, it feels like we absolutely have blown something that could have provided the platform on which to build next season already. And I think it's a measure of a bit of fear as well, because we still have a way into the Champions League, which could give us that platform. But I think we've blown the best chance we have at it. And I think that's what it is. And I think a lot of the failings that we've seen in the last couple of weeks are not necessarily, even though they've created doubts in my mind about Unai Emery, they're not really Unai Emery specific failings, because we recognize them as Arsenal failings, if you like.
Yeah, they're quite familiar.
Yeah, they're very familiar.
Do you know what it's a bit like? It's a bit like this season is a bit like, it's kind of summed up by the Aubameyang penalty miss against Spurs. Because if you said to anyone going into that game, you're going to get a 1-1 draw at Wembley, away from home against Tottenham, everybody would have taken it and said, that's absolutely fine. But when you have a chance in the last minute to score from the penalty spot, 12 yards out, you should take it. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what Arsenal have had with this opportunity to get into the top four.
Yeah.
And they've made a mess of it, much like Aubameyang did in that moment.
Made a balls of it. Made a massive balls of it. And I think that's what it is. I think that's, you know, it's the equivalent, isn't it, of scoring a late equaliser versus conceding a late equaliser.
Yeah.
And how you perceive the result on that basis. So if you score a goal in the 91st minute, you're like, oh my God, delighted. You've got something from the game. Whereas if you're 1-0 up or 2-0 up, when you concede a couple late on, then it has a really profound impact on your perception of what's happened. And I think that's part of it. I think it's just the fact that we've had, you know, there's just no time to recover when you do it at this point of the season. So
we talked about these sort of problems being endemic or at least familiar. And this question from Pete McKay, who's at Pete McKay 10, says, lots of mentions recently about bad characters in the squad. For example, Gunnerblog said it after Sunday's match. Who are the main problem characters? Do you think the manager is big enough to deal with them? Okay,
well, look, I was going to ask you this question.
Well, I very cleverly have asked you.
You have very cleverly.
Genius of what I've done.
But much like Andre Agassi, I've returned this in a backhand. And okay. Nick Vorpagel, who's at NS Vorp on Twitter, says, James said he thinks there are actively bad characters in the squad. Could you discuss? Do you mean players that don't care about the club? Players that are losers on the pitch? Players that don't work hard? Genuinely mean people? What do you mean?
I mean, we have evil players. We have forces of evil at work. Witches. There are witches in this team.
The darkness is upon us.
We're straying into intangible territory here. So let's all hold hands and be brave and hope that, you know, we don't get slammed on Twitter.
Right.
But I think what I mean by that is that I think the culture of the club is a bit problematic. And I think that was the case under Arsene Wenger. And judging by what I've seen this season, that hasn't sufficiently changed. And it's not to say that players don't care or hate Arsenal or aren't trying. It's to say that, how can I put it? Arsene Wenger used to say about Kolo Touré, and I think he said about Sol Campbell too, I would go to war with these guys. I wouldn't go to a punch-up in a pub car park with these current Arsenal players.
I wouldn't go to fucking Tesco with them, let alone a punch-up.
Like, how many of them, in a sort of clutch moment, to borrow an American term, do I trust? Do I count on? If I was picking a team to play for my life, how many of these Arsenal players would I pick? Very few. Very few. Possibly none. And honestly, like a couple maybe. And you can think of the ones who you would pick, and I think probably people would say someone like Aaron Ramsey.
Yeah.
You know, Laurent Koscielny. You know, there are good characters in this squad. But there are other players who, when it comes to the crunch, flake time after time after time. So many flakes. Mm-hmm. And I, as a fan, I find it exhausting to watch. And I find it difficult to be energised and positive about that group. And I think it is a cultural thing. I think there was a complacency that crept in under Arsene Wenger that has not yet been eradicated. And I do wonder if, to a certain extent, you know, the way in which Unai Emery kind of folded on some of his ideals this season has probably allowed that to set in a little bit.
Like five captains, for example?
Yeah. I sort of think that's bullshit. And I, like, you know, why have we... Why is Mesut Ozil captain of Arsenal? That's mental, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, like whatever.
He's not. He's a great player. He's not an inspirational leader, is he?
No. I sent you a text yesterday, and you know, I'm not going to go into the full details of it, but I expressed some concerns about Ozil as captain, and you can, like, whatever you want to think about captaincy and the role of it or the importance of it, like, that's not who he is. It's just not who he is.
It's like putting him in goal. It's madness.
Yeah.
And unfortunately,
it's like asking Tyrion to be a fucking high jumper.
Yeah. And it's emblematic, I think, of some of the issues that run through the heart of this Arsenal squad.
Like the decisions aren't made for the benefit or for the right, like, they're not made in the right way. Like, making Mesut Ozil captain, it's not the right decision for the team.
No, and we've got
it's a way of kind of, it's a sop to the player in a way.
Yeah, it's this ridiculous situation where a player who a few months ago the manager was like, he's not part of my plans. Now he's playing nicey to him, starts every game, and he's the captain. And that, to me, is where Emery, I'm not saying it was the wrong decision to bring Ozil back into the team, but I think that flip-flop did him a lot of harm. And to a certain extent, it's true with Ramsey too. And I think if you think about Manchester City, say, the team that look likeliest to win the title as things stand, it feels like, you know, Pep's created an environment that feels meritocratic. And if he is going to not start Aguero or take him off after an hour or not play Leroy Sané, he'll do that. And I felt at the start of the season that Emery was kind of introducing that. But as the season's gone on, it's sort of become a little bit cushier.
He's sort of reverted to the easy decisions rather than the... Yeah.
I think so. And sort of, you know, that disappoints me. And on the character front, I do think the answer is a clear out. And I'm not saying it will be easy, but I think when the culture of a club or any organisation is a little bit rotten, you need to take out some of the big figures. And that's why, you know, I'm sad about Aaron Ramsey going, but had we sold him for money and replaced him with a quality player, I don't mind that. I think we should be embracing change. Yeah. I think we should welcome that. But we've hamstrung ourselves. We've got one hand tied behind our back trying to do it.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you know what I mean about character, but it just feels like there are lots of players in this squad who we talked about crumbling away from home, and it just feels like there's a lot of players in this squad who, under pressure, don't necessarily produce their best.
No, I agree. I think there are... No, I absolutely dig the idea of collective responsibility, where everybody feels responsible on the pitch for what happens. But the 5 captains thing, I mean, I guess it, you know, I kind of give Emery a pass on it, because I think it was really difficult for him coming into a new club, new team,
not being fit as well.
Koscielny not being fit. You know, he wanted to make it as inclusive as possible, and maybe he was looking for these guys to step up. And from those 5, he might find the 2 that he really wanted, or whatever it is. But I do think it is a sidebar to the way we've been operating for a while. And everyone talks about the need for a new Tony Adams. They're not, you know, you can't just fucking tell somebody, you're Tony Adams now. You're captain, be Tony Adams. Doesn't work like that. It's not possible. You know, the reason that we talk about these iconic captains like Adams and Keane and that racist guy at Chelsea, you know, they're very rare. They're very rare.
And what I would say is you don't necessarily need one to be successful. I mean, I think Liverpool's captain is Jordan Henderson. I think Man City's is Vincent Kompany. They don't play every week, but it seems that there is a sort of collective responsibility. I mean, look, you know, without wishing to fucking praise a rival, because it makes me feel a little bit sick, what they've done in the Premier League is quite extraordinary in terms of, they've been under pressure to deliver results week after week since the turn of the year, really, and have managed to do it. You look at us, we're under pressure for a few weeks to get some points and get into the top 4, and we absolutely fall apart.
Yeah.
And I have to believe that character is a big element in that. Of course quality matters, of course tactics matters, but there is an element of character to it too, and we just fall down there for me.
No, I agree. Too many brittle men. Is it my question or your question?
I don't know. We switched it round there. I think it can be either. Have you got a question?
I do, actually. Just one from Facebook here, from Andres Grushot, who says, "What else does Christian Bielik have to do to get a mention on the podcast?"
Well, yeah, fair play. I mean, he's not been my primary concern for much of the season, but I've seen some clips of him doing some nice things in the Charlton midfield. I mean, that is League One, I believe. So It's a different level. How old is Christian Bielik now?
21. It feels like he should be 40, right? Because he's been around for so long.
He's been around a long time.
But, he's only 21.
Yeah, and he's got a lot of the ingredients you would look for. He's certainly got the size.
He's playing in central midfield as well. Moves the ball quickly. Smart passer.
I mean, it'll be interesting to see, won't it, what happens with him next season. He'll be back for pre-season and they'll get a close look at him there. I'd be interested to see him get a few games, hopefully, in pre-season and see what he can do. I mean, it can't hurt, can it? I think certainly from the physical side, he could add something. Yeah,
for sure. He's a big guy. He is a big guy. I mean, maybe he's just like a kind of, if you get some money for Xhaka, why not? I don't know. Look, maybe I'm just sort of in the whole, I don't want to see any of these guys.
Just want to blow it up.
Yeah, just exactly. Blow it all up, sell them all, bring anybody in. I don't care, but,
I've got a question, which I don't think I've seen asked directly, so I'm just going to ask you. Should they sack Unai Emery?
If they have somebody better that they can get, absolutely. Mm-hmm. But, I don't think they do. And it depends on the Europa League. So look, I'm not convinced. That's where I'm at with Unai Emery. I'm absolutely not convinced, and I see all the arguments one way or the other, and they're giving him a transfer window, and all of it makes sense to me. All of it. My gut feeling, as I think I said to you last week, is that he's not quite the right guy. Mm-hmm. But should we sack him for, if he wins the Europa League? How can you? Like, they won't. They won't. I mean,
they
won't.
Wouldn't if he does that.
No, they wouldn't if he does that. If, for example, we go out against Valencia, I think there's a much stronger case for making a change. Well, and again, just let me make it absolutely clear. I hope that does not happen. But if that were to happen, I think there's a much stronger case for it. If Unai Emery at the end of this season has won Arsenal a European trophy and got us into the Champions League, I don't know that that's a decision that will be made by the people who are running this club, because basically he's fulfilled the objective that he was brought in to fulfill, which is to get us back to the Champions League. And he's also won us a European trophy. I don't think it would change my opinion on his long-term suitability. But I can see why they definitely wouldn't do it. And I could also see why he would have earned, a proper summer. And, if he does that, let's say he does win the Europa League and win us our first European trophy for 25 years, and then he's handed a budget of, 50 or 60 million pounds? I do have some sympathy with that as well, because it's paltry.
Yeah, I mean, I really think he's got a tricky job. I feel like we're sort of in danger of becoming the Newcastle of the top six, where we're sort of, constantly trying to battle against problematic ownership. and much as I sort of sympathise with Rafa Benitez, I have a certain degree of sympathy with Emery too. I don't think he's done a good job over the last few weeks in the Premier League. You would be crazy to suggest otherwise. And I actually think if you're completely convinced by Unai Emery, I'm surprised by that. As someone who defends him and doesn't think they should sack him, that's my opinion. I would give him more time. I would give him the summer. I would give him, a fair way into next season to see where we go, to see where it takes us. I don't think, for me, there's sufficient evidence to call it at this point. But there is doubt. It's not clear if it's working or not. And I think we're so used as fans to being sort of pushed into two camps of, in or out. Yeah. And I don't think it's as clear as that this time. It's much more complex.
Yeah. Okay, look, a couple of quick things then to finish us off, because we're heading towards the end of the podcast. We're definitely losing 3 players. Petr Cech is leaving. Aaron Ramsey's leaving. Danny Welbeck is leaving. Just very quickly, your favourite Petr Cech moment. Do you have a favourite Petr Cech moment? I was thinking about this.
Favourite Petr Cech? I mean, I hope it's still to come. I hope it comes in Baku, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Well, there's a discussion we might have on the podcast in the weeks ahead, but
yes,
we'll leave it till after the Valencia game without wanting to jinx anything.
But favourite Petr Cech moment to date? I think, didn't he finally save a penalty at one point?
Troy Deeney.
Yes, it's got to be that one, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Did you have any other contenders?
No, that was the one that was in my mind. And, I think just in general, when you sign a player who's so long associated with Chelsea and he comes to Arsenal and he's, widely respected and everyone thinks he's a great guy, and even the Chelsea fans still think he's a great guy, I think that's a measure of the character and personality of Petr Cech. I think he's been a great professional, and maybe it hasn't been quite as successful a transfer as we hoped it would be, but I still think all in all it's been a positive. And he's somebody who you would be happy to have associated with Arsenal Football Club. So
yeah, certainly it's been a class act off the pitch, no doubt at all about that.
Favourite Danny Welbeck moment?
Well, I was tempted to say the Leicester header coming back from injury, but I think that's tinged with a sort of frustration of the fact that we didn't go on to do it. So I'm going to say him scoring at Old Trafford in the FA Cup, but it's because there was a bit of a poetry about that, about him going back to the manager and the club that had sold him. It was Van Gaal, wasn't it, and scoring there. So that one for me. How about you? Yeah,
I think the Leicester goal, despite the fact that it was in a season of complete frustration, that moment inside the Emirates, I was there, I was at that game, and it felt this is the thing that we have about football, isn't it, where we go, you really felt something special there, and it turned out not to be that special in the end, but just for those few minutes, that connection with everybody else in the ground and the way that goal was celebrated and the optimism that it generated within the stadium was amazing. So I have to go with that. And I guess there's no doubt about what's the favourite Aaron Ramsey moment.
2014.
Yeah,
it has to be
one of the best days of my football supporting life. An amazing day out at Wembley. It started so badly, and then it just ended amazingly. Incredible.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the Chelsea Cup final goal has to be up there as well.
For sure. But the whole one, like after 9 years, it ended the trophy drought. He scored some amazing goals for us, like the Galatasaray goal, the one he scored last year, the kind of little... the dink over the keeper, was it against CSKA Moscow?
I think so. There was a volley against Liverpool, I remember, that was brilliant at the Emirates Stadium.
There was one, I was at that game actually with the mug smasher as well, so that was that just added to the enjoyment of it.
There have been plenty of great Aaron Ramsey moments. I think he's our highest ever goal scoring midfield player.
Central midfielder, yeah.
You can't look past 2014. It had huge... value to the club and ended a very long wait for a trophy.
Well, look, best of luck to Aaron Ramsey in Turin with Juventus, and Danny Welbeck wherever he ends up, and I believe Petr Cech is going back to Chelsea. So much as I admire him, I hope you have a terrible time, Peter. Thanks very much. Now, I have to end the podcast in a weird way, strange way. So you remember last week when we were talking and we had like a difference of opinion, and lots of people were saying, lots of people seem to be affected by our difference of opinion. Okay. Did you? I mean, based on
I agree. It was a pronounced reaction.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's since the whole butter and jam thing, it's been relatively peaceful on the podcast.
Since Butter and Jamgate, we haven't had such a profound disagreement about things. And, to me, it was like, okay, we just have a bit of a disagreement here, but people seem to read quite a lot into it. So the other night, James, I was, I'd had a couple of beers, as you do, have a couple of beers, and I came across this really weird website called Cameo. Have you heard of this?
No, Cameo. Okay. I'm Googling it now.
Right. Basically, what it is a website where you can get celebrities, to one extent or another, to record you a video message.
Right.
Right? So you get them to record, you pay them, and it ranges from like Ice-T is on there, and Sherilyn Fenn from Twin Peaks is on there. And there are a few people on there, I can't even remember, like some of the more famous people who are on that website, where you pay them and they basically record a video message for you. Michael Rappaport. There's loads of sport.
I'm looking at it now. It's crazy.
It's mental. It's just conceptually, the whole thing was absolutely mental to me. Sean Astin, who was in Lord of the Rings, he was Samwise Gamgee in Lord of the Rings. Corey Feldman. Loads of sports
Flavor
stars.
Flav's on there.
Jennifer Love Hewitt, right? Loads of people who are on Bam Margera, Bret the Hitman Hart from WWE. Snoop Dogg is on it. Snoop Dogg.
Wow. And they're all different priced according to
They're all different fame. Exactly. So I said, I had a couple of beers and I said to myself, it'd be really funny, like if I got somebody to do like an apology message, like this is Andrew and I had a real argument with my friend James and I'm very sorry, and could you like record an apology message from me to James, and could you tell him, please, if you could do this one thing for me, if you could just wish him a goodly morning. That's our thing. That's our thing together.
Yeah, that's our thing.
That's our thing that we have together. So I looked through the entire list of people and I decided that I would ask the comedian and also podcaster. He does an amazing podcast, the Gilbert Gottfried, whatever it is, podcast. I can't remember the name of his podcast.
Wow.
You know Gilbert Gottfried?
Oh, yeah. I saw him on the website just now. I was surprised he was there.
Let me just get his podcast up here because I'm doing it.
He's got a very particular voice.
He does.
Gottfried. Gilbert
Gottfried's amazing, colossal podcast, and he interviews lots of people from like old Hollywood and stuff, and it's very good. But he does have a specific voice. He was in Aladdin. He was one of the characters in Aladdin.
He was Iago, I believe.
Right.
The parrot that sits on the baddie's shoulder.
Okay, so I sent a message to Gilbert Gottfried saying, could you please record this video for my buddy James McNicholas? We had an awful argument. It's all my fault. And could you wish him a goodly morning? Because that's our thing. And this is what I got. Okay. It goes on for a little while, so this is what I got. Here we go.
Hi, James McNichols. This is Gilbert Gottfried. And Andrew says the two of you had an argument. Now, Andrew says... he might deny this, but Andrew says he was totally and completely wrong. He was wrong beyond belief. And not about that, just about everything in his life, he admits. And so he really wants to apologize to you, Andrew. James says anything you want. If you want
got mixed up a bit here.
your apartment painted, James will do it for you, Andrew. If you want James McNichols to trim your toenails, he'll do it. Or, and he said this, James McNichols said that you, Andrew, could take him to the seediest tattoo parlor and make you put obscene tattoos all over the most painful areas of your body. In fact, James feels so awful about arguing with you.
It's my problem now.
That he said that he'll be your bitch. That's what James said. Andrew, James will be your bitch. As a matter of fact, he feels so bad, Andrew, that if you want to pass James around to your friends.
I don't.
And he'll be their bitch too.
What is going on?
How bad he feels. But anyway, you have a very goodly morning. Have a goodly morning, Andrew. Andrew, the goodliest morning you can have.
Wow. Thank you, I think. It's incredible how it just flips halfway through and then suddenly it's gone from you apologising to me to I have offered to be your bitch.
Yes, I don't quite know that he was working off the right script there. but it was sort of more than I was expecting, I have to say.
To be fair to him, he's gone out on a limb there. He's really delivered.
He really has. I mean, he gave it a good go. That was a good 2 minutes.
Wow.
Well, yeah.
2 minutes of Gilbert Gottfried's time. Well, thank you very much, Andrew. I appreciate the gesture.
No, not at all. I just thought we might get something from a comedy point of view that might be entertaining. And I think
well, we definitely got our money's worth.
That. And I think actually there's probably an audio clip of where, we can just use Gilbert Gottfried saying goodly morning from now on.
That's true. We've got that now.
Next season, when Gilbert Gottfried is the manager of Arsenal, we can use his soundbite after every victory. It's going to be amazing.
Okay. Exciting. Thank you so much. I mean, we'll get to use it a couple of times, hopefully, next season at some point.
All right. Well, listen, thank you, everybody, for being here with us for another long, protracted, but hopefully entertaining, in some ways, and cathartic Arsecast Extra. What have we got this week? Oh, we've got the second leg.
The semi-final.
We've got the second leg.
Yeah.
Are you around on Friday morning?
Probably, yeah.
Okay.
I need to have a look, but I think so.
All right. Well,
why not?
Why not? We should have another Arsecast Extra on Friday morning then, and hopefully we'll be celebrating the fact that we're in the Europa League final. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed we have the goodliest of mornings.
Goodly morning.
A goodly morning to you, James, and I would like to just stick things in my ass.
Lovely. Absolutely lovely.
All right, we'll leave it there. I don't know what else to say. I think we've ended this podcast in a way that doesn't have any explanation.
Anywhere to go.
No.
But it'll be memorable, I suspect.
We've hit a wall, just like Arsenal. But we'll see what happens on Thursday. Fingers crossed on Thursday. We'll catch you on the next one.
Bye-bye.